You feel a rumble beneath your feet and the ground shifts. Before you can react, an insectoid creature the size of a warhorse bursts forth. Plated in a dark carapace, the beast clambers from its burrow, mandibles chittering in anticipation. Spindly limbs carry it forward and its clawed forelegs swipe for you. This is the Ankheg. It is certainly not a particularly popular creature, but those that play with it or fight against it always end up loving them. And it's no wonder, considering it is a well-designed monster with a very clear theme, strategy, and flavor. Now, let's go ahead and just open up the monster manual for 5th edition and check out its lore and stats to see why people love this thing so much, and then after that, we'll talk about what they don't tell you about this thing. So let's see. It says here that the Ankheg resembles an enormous many-legged insect, its long antenna twitching in response to any movement around it, its legs and sharp hooks adapted for burrowing and grasping its prey, and its powerful mandibles can snap a tree in half. So what we have here, it's basically an insect that resembles something of a praying mantis, but with a tough looking carapace and some really scary mandibles. Alright, well, awesome so far. Now in here they tell us that it uses its mandibles to dig tunnels. It then hunts by burrowing below the surface and waiting for its antenna to detect movement from above. Then it bursts from the earth and seizes its prey with its mandibles, crashing and grinding while it secretes acid digestive enzymes. These enzymes, it says here, helps dissolve a victim for easy swallowing, but the Ankheg can also squirt acid to take down foes. Now, you see, it's always great when the creature's lore and stats are very specific about how the creature is meant to hunt. See, when the message is clear, it lets the DMs play the creature as it should be played, and if the strategy does so happen to be also very interesting, it can very easily create fun and engaging fights over and over again, even if you're not an expert DM. This is wonderful right here. Now, down here, they tell us that the Ankhegs receive a certain portion of their nutrients from the soil through which they burrow. However, it also says that they must supplement their diet with fresh meat. So apparently, according to this here, the Ankheg loves pastures teeming with livestock which it can use to eat, and because of that, it says that the Ankhegs are the bane of farmers and rangers everywhere. See, I love this part because now we know where the Ankhegs tend to be. We know what they tend to do, but more importantly now, we know who is going to be asking the brave adventurers, the players, to defeat the monster. Right? The farmers. The quest givers are right here. The lore literally just tells us. See, Ankhegs can be great for a dungeon master because it is not the type of creature that a well-defended city can just easily deal with, since they live underground, which means it is easy to see why adventurers would be specifically called for to deal with this type of monster. So in other words, it's so easy for a DM to use this monster and have it make sense. An army of guards can't quite help out, and so they need the heroes, and that's fantastic. The stories basically write themselves here. And then the last bit just says that the tunnels that the Ankheg leave behind are perilous and easily collapsible, but if a brave soul can venture them, they might find molted Ankheg chitin, hatched Ankheg's eggs, or the grisly remains of its victims, including coins or other treasures scattered during the creature's attack. In here, we're just sort of building more on the second point, but it basically gives you a really cool, mini dungeon idea for dungeon masters to use, which is the exploration of a dangerous Ankheg's lair, which is honestly very flavorful. Okay, but yeah, you can tell that I'm gushing a bit at this lore entry, and it's not that often that I do this, but I do think that this is a great example of a perfectly executed entry for a monster in the monster manual. On first look, it just tells you a bunch of cool details about a fun monster, but once you start really digging through the type of information that is presented here, it's almost as if they're telling you how to actually run the creature and how to create a fun mini adventure. It's all written in here. See, we can perfectly build it with the information that we directly just just got. Farmers are going missing, so the guards ask adventurers for help. When the heroes get there, the Ankheg is waiting in ambush. It comes out, grapples the creatures, and spits acid at them. When wounded, the monster digs back down and rushes through its tunnels. The heroes then travel through the tunnels, encountering the tools of the farmers and eventually the remains of the farmers themselves. And then in one last glorious confrontation, the heroes slay the Ankheg within its tunnel and return the bodies of the farmers to their loved ones. I didn't even have to work hard to make that really cool little mini story. Like, it's all given to me by just the nature of how the creature is presented and the things that it does. I think it makes sense, perfect sense actually, why DMs love using this monster and why players love fighting it. It's just a type of monster that lends itself for a fun mini adventure, and the 5th edition monster manual did a pretty good job at helping as well. But now, let's check out its stat block. So it is a large monstrosity with no alignment, nothing interesting there. It has an armor class of 14, which is all thanks to its kiting, which is, by the way, very impressive. Since it has no dexterity, we can see that its natural armor is giving it a +4 to its armor class, which is basically equal to a breastplate, so it is pretty strong. Interestingly enough, if you knock the Ankheg prone, his armor class is reduced to 11. They actually don't mention why that is at all in the entry, which is kind of strange, but I mean, to be fair, it is somewhat obvious. It is because its armor is weaker on its belly. So the idea is that you can flip the creature over by making it prone, which would then let you strike it at its soft spot. It's a small thing, granted, but I love that it is there. It just makes the creature even more dynamic, more interesting. So in here we can see that the Ankheg has a burrowing speed, which is not particularly fast, so the Ankheg is basically not going to be running away by opening new tunnels. Instead, it's just going to be using its old tunnels if it wants to leave an encounter. Which is good for the players because it basically means that all you have to do is just follow the tunnels that exist and you will eventually find that it cannot outrun you in that way. Now, we can see that it is very strong, but not intelligent at all. This is pretty normal. This is basically insect level intelligence. Now, what does that mean for the Ankheg? Well, that would probably mean that if you shoot at it from range, it has likely no freaking clue what is hitting it. It means that it would attack illusions all the time, or that it would fall for every trap imaginable, or fall for the same trap over and over and over again, etc., etc. This is basically as dumb as a creature can literally get. Which makes sense, again, for an insectoid-like creature. Now down here we can see it has tremor sense out of a range of 60 feet, which is what it uses to sense creatures through the ground. That was, of course, already expected. As far as its attacks, it can bite with its mandibles, which deal slashing and some acid. The acid are those digestive enzymes that it can produce that we already talked about, and yeah, while it bites, it can also grapple whoever it bites, which is cool because, of course, the creature will try to grapple its victims and then drag them down into its tunnel. So the ability works very well with its intended purpose. And lastly, we have the acid spray, which is, to be fair, pretty normal. We see abilities like these a lot. It is a line AoE that deals a ton of acid damage. It's just always nice to see these abilities, a different way to attack on a creature. It's always nice to see. But yeah, there you have it, the 5th edition entry for the Ankheg. A really good entry. However, it does so happen to be missing some pretty cool information, stuff about the Ankheg that you must know. So now, without further ado, let's talk about what they don't tell you about the Ankheg. Before we do that though, this video is brought to you by me. I am sponsoring myself to let you all know that Monster Classes 5 is officially out over at MrRex.store. With Monster Classes 5, you can play as a troll, as a gnoll, or as an earth elemental. These function as both your race and your full class, with features all the way up to level 20. And it also includes lore for each of the monsters and useful rollable tables designed to help you create the backstory for your new monstrous class. As an earth elemental, you have complete control over rock and stone, be that to manipulate the earth around you or to shape your very own form. You can grow large and become a tank, or focus your might right onto your fist to deal extra damage, or perhaps shrink in size and burrow through the ground. From creating gems right in your body to commanding the elements to assist you, the earth elemental is a powerful ally to have. The gnolls are strong, fast, and hard to pin down. With their feature Quick Step, gnolls can move outside of their turn in order to reposition themselves, a great skill to have in order to help isolate their targets. See, gnolls are powerful against enemies that are either surrounded or left completely separated from their friends.
You can be part of Clan Felmaw and adopt warlock powers, you can be part of Clan Fangbond in order to hunt with a hyena companion, or Clan Swiftspear to be a martial powerhouse. And then, lastly, the Trolls. They are nearly unkillable. Their legendary regeneration prevents them from dying, unless they sustain acid or fire damage, of course. This they use to their benefit, using their feature Frenzied Attacks to deal extra damage with their strikes at the cost of taking some of that damage as well. And when a troll is below half of their hit points or lower, they enter a Berserk mode that makes them even more formidable. And check out Monster Classes 5 at mrrex.store. The link is in the video description. Thank you all so much for the support. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, back onto the video. So first things first, before we go any deeper, no pun intended, you have to know how the creature fully looks like, because the official art for 5th edition only shows its front. The Ankheg is 10 feet long. It is a large creature, primarily because of how long it is. The creature is usually not that much taller than 5 or 6 feet in height, again, kind of like a horse. We know this because in the lore, they tell us that such is the size of the tunnels that it builds. A traditional Ankheg tunnel is about 5 feet high and 5 feet wide, so that should give you a really good idea of their overall dimensions. They're also quite heavy, weighing almost as much as an ogre actually, which puts them at about 800 pounds, likely all the weight coming from that really powerful carapace. Now, Ankheg's tunnels are built like a maze, though not on purpose. They're actually literally random. The Ankheg just digs wherever it feels like it might get food and nutrients from the earth, because as you know, they eat a lot of the earth that they dig. There are 3 important features about these tunnels that you must know though. One is that most often than not, the tunnels go straight. These are not like the purple worms that enjoy making hoops in circles. Ankhegs just basically go straight. 2 is that there is usually no more than just one entrance into an Ankheg tunnel system. If there are more than one entrance, it is typically because the monster has been hunting creatures, and so it basically opens new holes just in order to ambush new creatures. And 3, the deepest that an Ankheg tunnel system will ever go is almost always 40 feet in depth. That is because deeper than this, you usually tend to see hard, packed earth that is just a bit too tough for the Ankheg to dig through comfortably, but perhaps more importantly, this hard, packed earth just doesn't taste good for the monster. Basically, they don't like to eat it. The water content of the earth in there also tends to be higher at those depths, which basically makes it harder for the creature to move through. Now, a few interesting tidbits about this. If you ever wanted to get an Ankheg out of its tunnel system, usually going down there and hunting it's not the best idea, because the tunnels will collapse very, very easily, which means you would be buried alive and, of course, die. What you can do, however, is smoke the Ankheg out. Now, Ankhegs hate smoke and will usually avoid it whenever they can, so if you can find a way to fill the tunnels with smoke, you can almost guarantee that the creature will rush its way back to the outside, and since there is usually only one exit hole, you can easily just wait for the creature there and either ambush or trap it there if you can, since, again, they're too dumb to avoid any kind of traps. And one little extra bit of information that you may find interesting: if you were to trap one, or would like to try, know that the lore states that turpentine, which is a distillation of pine sap, puts Ankhegs to sleep. It's basically just another one of their weaknesses. It's just an interesting weakness that is very specifically brought out in the lore. Now, speaking of weaknesses, Ankhegs have 2 major, and I mean major weaknesses that can be very easily exploited if only you knew about them. See, as you can tell, Ankhegs have an exoskeleton. That is, their skeleton is outside of their body, which takes on the form of a chitinous armor. Without the armor, their bodies are basically squishy, and a baby could tear them apart. Well, now, a thing about exoskeletons is they don't grow. When an Ankheg gets older and bigger, they are forced to shed their chitin armor so they can grow a new one. It is at this moment when they are at their weakest. Ankhegs shed their exoskeleton about once a year, and this usually happens around the fall. It takes 2 days for the whole armor to be shed, and then about 2 more weeks to grow a new one.
Well, the creature is naked. It is when it is at its most vulnerable. But interestingly enough, it's more than just being susceptible to attacks. It's also that the process of growing a new chitinous layer is extremely demanding on their body, making them sluggish and sapping their strength. In other words, they basically, like, while they're growing this new exoskeleton, they cannot bite very hard. They move really slow, they're easier to strike, and interestingly, they can't even squirt their acid. Apparently they need their exoskeleton to squirt acid. Now, while in this mode, while they're growing out their exoskeleton, they can dig, but they choose not to, since apparently the process of digging, or really like moving a lot for that matter, during this stage has a chance of having their exoskeleton grow out weird. Basically imagine like they're trying to mold clay in the shape of their armor, so it's very easily shaped during these vulnerable days. And if they move a lot, it just comes out in a way that is just undesirable for them. Which means that they would rather stay very, very still and just let it grow as normally as it does. Now, because they are so vulnerable during these times when they're shedding, they secrete a disgusting liquid all around their tunnels that smells like rotten food. This is meant to dissuade other creatures from coming in and bothering the weakened Ankheg, but ironically, it is this disgusting foul smell that is used as a sure way for knowledgeable adventurers to basically pinpoint and track where the Ankhegs are located. Basically just follow the foul smell and you will find them. It's just that easy. Again, these creatures are not meant to be very smart. Now, that was one of the major weaknesses of the Ankhegs, but the other is, to be fair, it's a bit more traditional. Many creatures have this, is that Ankhegs hibernate during the winter, though obviously this would be exclusive for the Ankhegs that live in the colder areas. These ones will voraciously hunt for meat during the fall in order to store nutrients within their chitins, which they then consume over time as they sleep deep in their tunnels. The lore states that they do have the ability to wake up if needed, which is helped by the fact that their antennas are still functional even as they hibernate. So they can basically sense when creatures approach. However, it also states that it takes them minutes for the creature to fully awaken, so if you are fast enough, you can fully kill the hibernating Ankheg before it even has a chance to wake up. Alright, now moving on from that, it is finally time for your favorite segment of every Mr. Rex video. How does this creature reproduce? Alright, so female Ankhegs produce a hormone that, according to the lore, is intoxicating for the males. The addictive hormone drugs the males and forces them to approach the female. While in this dazed stupor, the male fertilizes the female, at which point the female Ankheg kills the male Ankheg. Now, if you think that is metal as fuck, just wait. The female then drags the corpse of the male into a wide tunnel where she then uses her sharpened scissors to open the belly of the male and then secretes her eggs inside of the man's corpse. Sheesh. Usually the female produces 2 to 12 eggs, out of which 75% of them are fully fertilized and will hatch successfully. It takes about 1 month for the babies to hatch, which is almost always before the mother goes to hibernation, if she lives in a colder climate, of course. Now, the reason things happen this way is because the babies eat the corpse of the father, which will last them throughout all of winter. Now, you might be asking, why wouldn't the mother just hunt for the babies instead of just killing the father? Well, she kinda does. She hunts for all of autumn for them, but that food is stored throughout winter so that the babies can have it after in spring. Then after spring is over, the babies are supposed to leave. See, Ankheg mothers only take care of their children for 1 season cycle, so by summertime, the mother will begin to chase them away from the nest. So what's interesting about this is that there's virtually never a time when a mother Ankheg hunts and directly brings her young food. Instead, it is basically all prepared beforehand. This is actually a good time to mention that Ankhegs are not aggressive with one another. They don't really cooperate with each other, at least intentionally, but they have no qualms with living relatively close to each other and they never attack one another. So when there are many of them in one place, what you usually see is them attacking the same targets together, but not like fighting in a cohesive fashion. They usually just attack their own targets. A common sight when this happens would be, for example, 2 Ankhegs each biting at a single prey, but playing a sort of tug of war with the prey as each tries to get as much as they can from the poor victim. Now anyways, it only takes 1 year for the baby Ankheg to resemble an adult and behave like one, and about 2 years or so to be almost indistinguishable from an adult, other than its size of course, because Ankhegs usually continue to grow until they reach 8 years of age, and then they die 2 or 4 years later. Whew, okay, now let's finish up the video with a couple of really interesting facts. In the lore, Ankhegs are only able to produce their acid spray once every 6 hours. The reason for this actually makes sense. That is because what they're spraying, as we discussed previously in the lore, is literally their digestive stomach acid, which of course, as you can imagine, takes time to replenish. The 5th edition entry did not tell you that this acid spray is actually a last resort for the creature. They are supposed to only do this if they are in terrible danger or if they are incredibly frustrated. The reason for that is that if they spew out their stomach acid, as you can imagine, they literally cannot digest food for the next 6 hours until that acid replenishes. So it doesn't make any sense for an Ankheg to just use their acid on a normal prey that they actually intend to eat. Another interesting factoid is that Ankhegs have extremely good eyesight, but with a detriment. Quote, "The Ankheg has superior eyesight due to its compound eye structure, though such vision is quite nearsighted. The hundreds of small black lenses in its eyes allow the creature to see with great clarity in gloom or at night with 6 feet ultravision. This sense is lost when underground, however. Above ground, in full daylight, the Ankheg's eyesight allows it a visual range of only 12 feet. End quote. So basically, if you stand 15 feet or farther away, the Ankheg probably can't even see you, though it can still sense you, mind you, with its tremor sense if you're still standing on ground. Something else, provided that you cure and preserve the chitinous body of an Ankheg well, you can indeed make armor with it, and turns out that their armor can be equally as good as a full set of plate armor. But even better actually, because it weighs less. Something else as well, the eyes of the Ankheg and their fluids are commonly used for potions and magical items that affect eyesight. The digestive acid can also be used as normal mundane acid if collected properly, and when done so, it can last for up to 6 months after the creature's death. Though be mindful that the acid can only be carried using a glass vial. And then lastly, turns out, the mandibles of the Ankheg can be used quite effectively as axe heads for great axes, and their front legs can be used as maces, though usually this requires for you to remove all of the meat inside of the carapace and then, of course, fill out that inside of the leg with a hard substance such as sand. Oh, actually, one last thing before we end the video. I don't know why I find this kind of funny, but if you ever thought that the name Ankheg was difficult to remember or to type, I would like to show you the 1st edition monster manual, where apparently they were made even somehow more complicated. Their name here was spelled with 2 H's rather than 1 H. 1 H before the K and 1 after. And the thing is, it's definitely not a misspell, because they also wrote it like this on the lore description multiple times. In fact, it is written like this 11 times on the 1st edition manual, so this was on purpose. I hope you enjoyed the video. Do make sure to check out my new Monster Classes 5 at MrRex.store. I am just absolutely in love with the troll, and I really want you guys to see it. They can sacrifice their own body parts to help prevent damage taken by an ally, and at higher levels, they can even rip off their own limbs and control them while separated from their body. They are nuts. MrRex.store. The link is in the video description below. Please check out Monster Classes 5, guys. I am really proud of it. I just want you guys to see it. But thank you all for watching the video, and I'll see you all next time.